Welcome to Tomorrow Unveiled, the deep research podcast designed to give you the most critical, corroborated intelligence you need to navigate this incredibly accelerated world. If you, like us, feel overwhelmed by the sheer pace of technological change, specifically the relentless expansion of artificial intelligence, then you are definitely in the right place. We're not here to chase fleeting headlines. We're here to look past the noise, look past the hype cycle and identify the seismic structural shifts happening right now across multiple sectors.
That's absolutely essential. Our mission today really is to analyze this stack of research and internal corporate reports that our dedicated research team pulled together. We're trying to identify the foundational movement shaping the next decade. And we found three major shifts, really strongly cross-corroborated, that are already in play. The first one, it's the full, undeniable automation of white-collar work. We're seeing AI move from being just an assistant to, well, an independent functioning entity. The second thing, and maybe the most urgent, is the startling failure of our current societal structures, like policy, reskilling initiatives, to keep pace with this disruption, so we lag.
Yeah.
And third, it's the fundamental re-architecting of your digital identity itself.
Yeah.
Which is frankly becoming the most critical piece of infrastructure in the 21st century.
Okay, so this deep dive on Tomorrow Unveiled is all about being future-proofed. It's about understanding this present structural crisis, the gap between how fast tech is moving and how slow institutions are responding. The goal is so you can develop a strategy, personally and professionally, to stay ahead of the curve. You really need to know where the system is breaking down so you can safeguard your own career and, importantly, your data.
Right. Let's start with the central technological driver, the one that just dominates all of our source material, AI. The key consensus we found is that AI is rapidly transitioning beyond its initial role as a co-pilot.
Okay, the co-pilot phase. That's what most people are kind of experiencing now, right? The helper tools.
Exactly. That was about task augmentation. It helped you draft an email, maybe summarize a document, generate some rough code. It was basically a productivity assistant, operating under strict human supervision.
So if the co-pilot is the assistant, what exactly is the agent? What's the real practical difference for someone like, I don't know, a business analyst?
Yeah, good question. The agent represents the true emergence of autonomy. It's shifting from just helping a human complete a task to fully automating complex end-to-end workflows. Think of it like this. A co-pilot might help a financial analyst draft a section of a quarterly report.
Mm-hmm.
An agent, though, is tasked with handling the entire workflow. It could automatically track key market indicators, reconcile transactions, draft the entire report based on preset parameters, maybe write it for legal review, and then even schedule its public release, all with minimal human oversight.
Wow, okay. Minimal oversight.
That shift from augmentation to full workflow automation, it's already exacting a clear, measurable, and actually highly concentrated toll on the white-collar labor market.
Right now.
And here's the fascinating and maybe, like you said, deeply concerning conflict that the reports highlight. We looked at surveys where, most workers aren't really panicking. They actually see AI as a career accelerator.
Yeah, that's striking, isn't it?
Over half of employees genuinely expect AI to boost their promotion prospects, not cost them their job. They still see it as a productivity booster, kind of extending that co-pilot idea indefinitely.
But the reality reported by the firms themselves, it tells a profoundly different and frankly more brutal story. While employees are busy learning to optimize their workflow with these tools, the firms are explicitly leveraging these advanced agent capabilities for, organizational restructuring and workforce reductions.
That corporate speak again?
Exactly. We've seen reports from major financial and back-office services companies describing this as a calculated move to right-size operations. And that's leading to what some sources describe as mass job cuts in historically stable sectors. The augmentation phase, the co-pilot, it often seems to be just a transitional bridge, maybe a necessary marketing narrative that gets quickly superseded by the massive economic incentive for full replacement.
It sounds like a classic innovator's dilemma, but applied to labor itself, which I guess is why our sources highlighted that quote from IBM's former CEO, Ginni Rometty.
The one about AI replacing people.
Yeah. AI won't replace people, but people who use AI will replace those who don't. It gets right to the heart of the personal mandate, doesn't it? You absolutely must learn to use AI as a strategic tool.
We have to.
Because those who resist integrating these new agentive systems into their work, they're simply going to be outcompeted by those who learn to collaborate effectively with the machine.
Precisely. The market isn't waiting around for workers to decide. This new automation wave, it targets tasks defined by routine, repetition, and high data throughput. And that's why these traditional white-collar roles, the ones we thought were the bastions of post-industrial stability, are now facing the highest level of threat.
Okay, let's dig into the specific roles that the research consistently flagged as most vulnerable. We're looking for sectors where the agent can just easily replace high volumes of routine work. The obvious starting point seems to be basic administrative and back office tasks, right?
Definitely. That includes things like data entry clerks, payroll administrators, general back office assistants. The agent just excels here because these tasks are so highly structured and standardized. AI tools are already replacing basic scheduling, complex document organization, even the routine drafting of standard internal reports. It's effectively eliminating layers of support staff whose roles were mainly based on processing volume.
And we've seen huge efficiency gains in customer service, too.
Absolutely. Think about phone representatives handling common repetitive queries. The modern, sophisticated 247 chatbots and virtual assistant systems. They're not just replacing these entry-level jobs, they're often doing it with superior speed and consistency. For the firms, the economic calculation is clear, but for the labor force, it eliminates a major entry point for workers who might not have advanced degrees.
But the threat goes much higher up the value chain than that, doesn't it? Into professional services built on digesting structured information. That feels like the next big target for this agent wave.
It absolutely is, and that immediately brings us to sectors built on document analysis, particularly legal and finance. For law firms, AI engines can now comb through millions of contracts, e-discovery files, case precedents, just at unparalleled speed. This directly threatens the job security of paralegals and junior lawyers, whose main task was that high-speed document review and contract analysis.
So it shifts the junior lawyer's role from researcher to
What's
product checker.
Initially, yeah, quality checker, maybe managing the AI output, and eventually, perhaps pushing them much faster towards higher-level legal strategy, the stuff the AI can't do.
And in finance and accounting, similar story.
The same principle applies. Routine bookkeeping, basic tax prep, standard financial analysis, they're increasingly handled by software. Agents can auto-categorize transactions, reconcile accounts, flag anomalies way faster than humans. So if your job involves, summarizing last quarter's data or ensuring compliance by checking standardized metrics, you are highly vulnerable. The source material really emphasizes that true job security in these fields now lies in interpretation, prediction, and client advisory, the human judgment layer.
Wow, this disruption is pervasive then. Even areas like sales and marketing fields we think of as built on creativity and communication, they're not immune either.
Not at all. The data our research team reviews suggests AI could automate roughly 2/3 of a sales rep's routine administrative tasks. Things like data logging, follow-up scheduling, basic lead qualification, that kind of stuff.
Okay, the grunt work of sales.
Right. And it also threatens over half of standard market research jobs, which often rely on repetitive data collection and synthesis.
So this comprehensive disruption forces a necessary deep pivot for basically every knowledge worker. The adaptation strategy that was corroborated across all our sources seems to emphasize pivoting upstream, focusing on uniquely human capabilities that these agent systems fundamentally lack.
That's the core idea.
What does that pivot actually look like in practice? For someone whose current job description is, say, 60% routine task management.
It means aggressively doubling down on human skills. Talking strategic thinking, complex judgment, high-stakes negotiation, and especially empathy and client advisory skills. For instance, accountants really need to move entirely away from the number crunching side and focus on strategic finance forecasting complex economic trends, interpreting anomalies that AI flags that can't actually explain, advising clients on multi-year future strategy. That human expertise and ambiguity, that's irreplaceable.
Okay. And how about for creative roles, like entry-level content writers or marketers who rely on fast turnaround, high volume?
They need to start viewing the agent as a creative partner. Let it handle the optimization and drafting burdens. Use generative tools for the tedious parts, the proofreading, the keyword optimization, the simple version drafting. That frees up the human to focus solely on original insights, developing deep narrative resonance, high-level brand strategy. The value shifts from sheer production volume to unique strategic oversight and emotional impact.
And beyond just adapting existing roles, our research also suggests there's this whole new category of adjacent jobs emerging.
Yes, and this is perhaps the most exciting opportunity, actually. Workers need to think about pivoting to AI-adjacent roles. These are the jobs needed to manage, train, and govern the agents themselves. Think of the AI trainer who fine-tunes models for specific company needs, or the model ethicist, ensuring systems operate without bias, the automation consultant, designing the new automated workflows, or even the data curator, managing the massive training data sets.
Roles that didn't even exist a decade ago.
Exactly. They're growing rapidly because someone needs to manage the machine's behavior and
Yeah.
ensure it aligns with human goals.
Okay, this transition is, well, it's grave, but also clearly filled with opportunity if you are proactive in integrating these tools. While you internalize the gravity of this shift, we're going to take just a quick moment here. If you're finding this insightful, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Tomorrow Unveiled, and maybe consider hitting that new hike button. It really helps us reach more viewers. And of course, be sure to turn on notifications so you never miss an update on the future. Okay, let's unpack this reskilling paradox you mentioned earlier, because here's where the systemic failure really comes into sharp focus, doesn't it? On one hand, you have these institutional think tanks. We saw reports from major global economic forums, all emphasizing the urgent need for deliberate, well-structured reskilling initiatives to close the skills gap. The narrative is that governments and businesses are, striving to reskill millions of workers to adapt to the new AI economy.
Yeah, that's the public narrative. But that augmentation and reskilling story is in direct contradiction with the reality of the economic incentives. Frontline reports we analyze show U.S. firms are explicitly leveraging Agentic AI for organizational restructuring and workforce reductions. The economic pressure is just overwhelming. Major consulting reports estimate that full automation could deliver, get this, a staggering $13 trillion in additional global economic activity.
$13 trillion. But if the profit incentive is that massive, $13 trillion is enough to reshape entire economies, how can any well-intentioned reskilling initiative possibly compete with that? Are institutions just offering feel-good solutions while firms execute the hard economic reality on the ground?
That's the absolute core of the paradox. When the potential gain is that massive, the gravitational pull toward replacement, not just augmentation, becomes pretty much inexorable, regardless of how many reports emphasize reskilling. For a corporation, the duty is ultimately to maximize shareholder value.
Right.
And a fully automated agent workflow is infinitely more profitable than a partially augmented human one. Augmentation is still an expense. Replacement is a transformative cost saving.
So augmentation just serves as a short-term step, maybe a PR step, on the path to full replacement in routine knowledge work. Yet, despite that pull, we are seeing some remarkably positive institutional responses, particularly in education, that seem to acknowledge this new reality and the need for proactive intervention.
We are, yes. We're seeing a strong institutional commitment to AI literacy, particularly in higher education and national strategy. Our research team found examples like universities mobilizing resources to ensure graduates are AI fluent. For instance, a major public university in Ohio announced a huge initiative to hire 100 tenure-track faculty with AI expertise over 5 years.
100 faculty, just for AI.
Yeah, specifically to ensure that every graduate, regardless of their major, possesses applied AI literacy. It's becoming a baseline skill.
And it's not just in the US, right? We saw global examples of this push.
Yes, exactly. Iceland, for example, launched a comprehensive national AI education pilot. They're providing broad access to advanced AI tools for teachers and integrating AI curriculum right into secondary schools. And this shift isn't just hopeful thinking. It's validated by hard data. Studies examining intelligent tutors and personalized learning platforms, often powered by AI themselves, found performance gains ranging from 15% to 35% among students. So this suggests that personalized adaptive learning platforms are absolutely key to closing the emerging skills gap at scale.
But because the scale of potential job disruption is just so immense, it forces society to consider a far more profound and fundamental change to our social contract. If the agent captures most of the value created, how do we distribute that wealth back to society? Which brings us directly to the huge debate over universal basic income, or UBI.
UBI, yeah, it's simple in premise. An unconditional periodic payment made to all citizens, irrespective of their employment status or income. The conversation around UBI has just exploded over the past decade, precisely because it directly addresses this fear that automation leads to mass structural unemployment and wage compression. Its proponents argue that UBI is the necessary new social contract. It's seen as the way to ensure technological progress and human welfare advance together rather than, at each other's expense. It's presented as the mechanism to address severe job insecurity and wage inequality resulting from automation.
The intuition behind it is strong. If the value gets concentrated in the hands of the machine owners, you need some mechanism to distribute that wealth back. But UBI sounds astronomically expensive. How do you actually fund something so massive, given that a UBI sufficient to meet basic needs could cost multiples of all existing transfer programs combined?
That's definitely where the complexity lies. Our sources detail several debated mechanisms. The traditional approach, and probably the most politically difficult, relies on increased income tax. But the models show that to fund a truly comprehensive UBI, you can't just rely on taxing the top earners. Tax rates would likely need to increase substantially across the board.
Which immediately raises red flags, right? Discouraging work.
Exactly. It raises significant economic concerns about discouraging the remaining human labor supply and potentially pushing jobs or capital offshore.
So if income tax is insufficient or maybe harmful to work incentives, we have to look at alternatives that don't tax labor directly.
Precisely. You move towards taxing consumption or using alternative tax bases. Consumption taxes, like a value-added tax or VAT, are widely explored as a viable and highly efficient funding option. Some economic models suggest a budget-neutral UBI one that just replaces existing fragmented welfare programs could potentially be funded with a modest increase in VAT. However, funding a truly substantial UBI, one that guarantees genuine economic security, would likely require a massive, probably politically toxic increase in consumption taxes hitting all income brackets.
We also saw the idea of taxing land value, which seemed potentially more equitable.
Yes, the concept of land value taxation, LVT, it's actually highly economically efficient. This tax targets the unimproved value of land itself, disregarding any buildings or improvements on it. Economists tend to favor it because it's difficult to avoid, it doesn't deter productivity in the same way income taxes might, and it's generally considered more equitable than taxing labor or capital. It's seen as taxing scarcity rather than production.
Okay, interesting. But the mechanism that feels most intriguing in the specific context of automation and provides that elegant link back to the problem is the robot tax.
Ah, yes, the robot tax. This idea, famously proposed by Bill Gates way back in 2017, suggests that companies replacing human workers with automated tools, robots or software agents, should pay taxes on those tools, maybe on their utilization, and at a level comparable to the income and payroll taxes the human workers they displaced would have paid.
That seems beautifully simple in theory, but I imagine the implementation is just a nightmare. How on earth do you define a robot or a taxable agent? Does a sophisticated spreadsheet macro count? Where do you draw the line? Does a highly advanced, fully autonomous agent count?
You've absolutely hit the implementation challenge square on. The political friction is enormous because the definition of a robot or a taxable agent would need to be codified legally, which, as we're about to discuss, is already lagging way behind. Advocates propose defining it maybe by a threshold, perhaps taxing only those machines or algorithms that execute tasks previously performed by humans and represent a clear, demonstrable replacement of staff. The idea is to create a financial friction that might moderate the pace of automation, give society time to adjust.
What's undeniable, though, is that the robot tax concept creates a direct financial link between the benefit of automation, that massive wealth generation, and the social support, the UBI funding, required to offset the disruption.
That linkage is key. Advocates see this kind of mechanism as essential, because without it, the research strongly suggests wealth will just continue to concentrate among the elite who own the automation technology and the associated data, and that leaves vast segments of the global workforce with diminished leverage and security. It becomes less an economic issue and more a systemic instability issue. Okay, as we transition into the domain of governance and policy, we really have to fully grasp this concept of socio-legal lag. Our societal structures, especially our legal and regulatory systems, they just operate at a sluggish pace, far, far slower than technological innovation. To illustrate this profound policy failure, our research team looked at a much simpler technological shift: remote work.
Right, a relatively simple location change for workers, which became pretty much universal during the pandemic in 2020. What did the research tell us about the timeline for policy to adapt just to that?
Well, the shift happened practically overnight in 2020, right? Yet the complex legal and financial implications are only just being codified into comprehensive law 5 years later in late 2025. For example, countries are still wrestling with basic things like who pays for electricity and internet usage when the worker is at home. Colombia is now mandating a connectivity allowance for remote employees. Costa Rica is now requiring employers to purchase specific extraterritoriality coverage in their labor risk insurance for employees working abroad.
Right.
And Cyprus, an EU member state, is just now codifying a right to disconnect into national law.
So we're talking about a 3 to 5 year lag for legal and regulatory systems to fully digest a simple change in work location and operational management. Okay, that establishes a pretty catastrophic baseline for dealing with AI.
Exactly. If it takes 3 to 5 years for policy to catch up to a simple location change, something we all live through and seems fairly straightforward, imagine the lag for profoundly disruptive agentic AI. AI is fundamentally altering the very nature of employment and capital. Society risks legislating solutions for the co-pilot problem years from now, maybe in 2030, who knows, long after the agent has already restructured the 2025 economy. That could cause irreparable damage to job pipelines, social stability, and potentially freeze an entire generation out of entry-level professional work.
And this policy paralysis is made even worse by what our sources are calling the data vacuum. Policymakers are essentially flying blind because they have contradictory or sometimes non-existent information about the actual impact of automation on jobs.
The contradiction is really stark. On one hand, you have this crisis narrative reports compiled from HR firms, industry groups describing immediate, localized, AI-driven mass job cuts. These reports are often anecdotal, but they paint a clear picture of localized devastation in certain sectors.
But then, on the other hand, you have the stability narrative. Analyses from major US and European think tanks have shown remarkable stability in overall national labor market since 2022. They argue there is no AI jobs apocalypse for now. But here's the kicker. The authors of those stable reports often admit, maybe in the fine print, that they are flying blind.
They do. They explicitly caution that policymakers need evidence, not speculation, because the major firms deploying this AI often refuse to share transparent usage data. Critically, they are not currently required to differentiate between a standard layoff due to economic conditions and an AI displacement layoff.
Which guarantees policy paralysis. If you as a government don't know where jobs are being lost specifically due to AI and where maybe new AI-related opportunities are being created, if you can't attribute the cause, how can you possibly design effective policies? You can't design targeted unemployment benefits or effective worker transition support or relevant educational reskilling programs. Without that data, the government can only react to the big macroeconomic average while potentially ignoring devastating microeconomic shifts happening underneath.
And this systemic failure seems to have forced a direct and immediate legislative response, one that acknowledges the absolute necessity of data. On November 5, 2025, a bipartisan group of U.S. senators introduced a direct challenge to this data vacuum. It's called the AI-Related Job Impacts Clarity Act, or S.3108.
Okay, tell us about the provisions of this bill, because it feels like a critical signal about where policymakers are finally starting to focus their limited attention.
Well, the core goal, as the proponents framed it, is simply to get a clear picture of AI's impact on the workforce. Think of it as a diagnostic tool, not necessarily a cure yet. The bill would mandate that major companies and federal agencies submit quarterly reports to the U.S. Department of Labor. And crucially, the data reported must specifically track AI-related layoffs and job displacement, distinguishing them clearly from standard economic attrition.
So it's not just about overall job numbers, it's about attribution, pinpointing the cause. It signals the end of the wait-and-see era, maybe?
It seems like it. Policymakers are openly acknowledging that effective governance is just impossible without this foundational objective data set.
Oh,
Exactly. The big battle of 2026 probably won't be just about regulating AI model training itself, though that's a huge fight coming too. It might actually be about mandating transparency from the SIRMs deploying the agents, the ones who are fundamentally restructuring the economy right now. Without that transparency, your personal adaptation strategy, the one we talked about earlier, is based mostly on anecdotal evidence, not verified insight.
And that transparency is tied directly to your ability to prepare and adapt, which is exactly why we're here on Tomorrow Unveiled. If you're listening on a podcast service like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we'd be incredibly grateful if you could take a second to leave us a rating and review for Tomorrow Unveiled. It truly helps us reach new listeners and informs more people about these crucial policy developments that are often flying under the radar. All right, now we shift focus. We've talked jobs, we've talked policy crisis. Let's talk about the digital foundation upon which our future society increasingly relies. Digital identity. Our research team confirms that ID has essentially been upgraded. It's gone from being a simple technical tool like a username and password to becoming bona fide critical infrastructure, on par with finance, transportation, or telecommunications.
Yeah, this maturation is driven by what our sources are calling the socio-technical imperative. We see this pattern across all major technologies, really. Once a technology matures and becomes deeply integrated into society, it has to evolve. It moves from being a purely technical domain to a socio-technical one. It must start accounting for human values, social behavior, ethical considerations, all that stuff, just to gain public trust and achieve wide adoption.
Okay, let's ground that in a common analogy, maybe. What does a socio-technical imperative look like in a physical system we all know?
Think about the evolution of the automobile. Early automotive engineering focused purely on the technical aspects, right? Making the engine run faster, more efficiently. But as cars became ubiquitous, the field had to integrate social concerns. Traffic laws, road safety standards, seat belts, airbags, anti-lock braking systems. Those features represent a blend of technical innovation and a deep understanding of human safety and social stability needs.
Okay. Got it.
AI and digital ID systems are at that exact maturation point right now. Pure technical efficiency just isn't enough anymore. The system fundamentally has to be trustworthy.
That reframing seeing ID as infrastructure that needs to be socially sound feels critical. Our stack of sources identified three main architectural megatrends that seem to be driving the future of digital identity.
Right. The first megatrend is decentralization and empowerment. This is the big shift away from centralized databases where, a bank or a government holds all your sensitive data toward giving users like you greater agency and control over their own data. Concepts like self-sovereign identity, or SSI, and decentralized identifiers, DIDs, are key here. The idea is the individual holds the cryptographic keys to their identity attributes, rather than some government or corporation acting as a custodian. It's about building trust by design.
Okay, what does that mean practically? How does my control actually change with something like SSI?
Well, currently, if you apply for a loan, you probably give the bank your full physical ID, maybe your full pay stubs, sometimes your social security number, lots of sensitive stuff. With SSI and DIDs, the bank could instead request a verifiable credential. This might be issued by the government, and it cryptographically proves you meet the specific requirements for the loan, like annual income exceeds $6 or date of birth confirms legal age, without the bank ever seeing the underlying documents or needing to store that sensitive data.
So I just prove the fact, not hand over the data.
Exactly. You, the user, decide when and how to present those specific credentials for verification. Much more control, much less data floating around.
Okay, that's trend one, decentralization. What's next?
The second major megatrend is global interoperability and harmonization. As digital agents and human interactions cross borders seamlessly online, our identity systems need to do the same. This absolutely necessitates harmonizing governance frameworks and technical standards. We see efforts like the EU's IDS regulation trying to do this, to allow trusted cross-border digital interaction. Identity just can't exist in purely national silos anymore because the digital economy is fundamentally global.
Makes sense. And the third shift, you mentioned it links back to the agent economy we discussed earlier.
It does, very directly. The third major shift is the profound convergence with cybersecurity. Identity is rapidly becoming the new security perimeter. This is heavily driven by the rise of the zero trust model. That's a cybersecurity philosophy that basically treats all access requests, whether they originate inside or outside the network, as potentially hostile until proven otherwise.
That sounds kind of like airport security, but for accessing your data or applications.
It's a great analogy. In a zero-trust environment, no user or device is trusted implicitly, even if they were just verified 5 minutes ago. Strong, continuous identity verification becomes central to every single access decision, every file open, every transaction. It fundamentally merges identity management with core security protocols. And importantly, the AI agent, when it's performing its automated tasks, also needs a robust digital identity and must operate under zero-trust verification to function securely within an organization.
Okay. And underlying all these architectural shifts, decentralization, interoperability, zero trust, is this non-negotiable principle of trust. You mentioned it earlier. High-value digital ID systems must embed privacy, security, and trust right into their core architecture. We saw estimates that the massive economic benefits of good ID systems, McKinsey estimated a potential value equivalent to 3% to 13% of GDP. They only materialize if the digital ID system is considered good.
Precisely. If people fear the system, if they worry about government surveillance, corporate control, data breaches, they simply won't use it, or they'll resist its adoption. And that huge economic opportunity just vanishes. Therefore, the system must be designed from the ground up to minimize harm and maximize inclusion. That's the socio-technical part.
And speaking of maximizing privacy while maintaining trust, this brings us to one of the most fascinating technical signals emerging from the research, zero-knowledge proofs, or ZKPs. We should probably take a moment to really explain how this cryptographic tool works, because it seems absolutely crucial for making decentralized identity actually private.
ZKPs are genuinely a cryptographic breakthrough. They directly address this inherent privacy challenge in digital verification. The name kind of explains it. You prove a statement is true without revealing any knowledge about the underlying data that makes it true. Zero knowledge transfer.
Okay, so how does that verification process actually differ from what we do today? Like showing your driver's license to prove you're over 21.
Right, let's use that age verification example. Currently, if a website or maybe a bar needs to know if you're over 21, they might ask for your date of birth, or more likely, look at your driver's license. They see all the private data, your name, exact birth date, your address, maybe even your height and eye color, just to get one single piece of binary information. Yes, no, are you over 21?
Yeah, you overshare massively just to prove one simple fact.
Exactly. With ZKPs, your digital wallet could hold a verifiable credential, maybe issued by the DMV or another trusted authority, stating your date of birth. When the website or bar requests age verification, your system runs a cryptographic proof on that credential, locally on your device perhaps. It simply returns a definitive, cryptographically secure, yes, this identity holder is over 21, without ever sending the underlying date of birth across the network. The verifier never knows if you're 25 or 75, just that you meet the threshold.
Wow, so you achieve powerful data minimization and selective disclosure automatically.
Yes, and that aligns perfectly with strict global privacy regulations like GDPR in Europe. It's a huge step forward.
That really does sound game-changing for privacy, but also for compliance, I guess.
Yeah.
It shifts verification from requiring data storage by the verifier to just requiring data proof, which greatly minimizes the attack surface for hackers, right? Less sensitive data being held everywhere.
It is absolutely a core component of future privacy by design systems. While ZKPs are still in the relatively early stages of widespread deployment, they are rapidly laying the groundwork for a digital identity that is not only secure but also deeply respectful of individual privacy. It helps solve that historic tension between needing verification and needing privacy.
And the ultimate implication of this convergence of a technology like ZKPs and human factors like trust is this powerful societal framing identified by our research. The growing argument that access to digital identity shouldn't just be a commercial product, but should be treated as a fundamental human right and a global public good.
This is the rights-based framing that many developing nations and major policy organizations are strongly adopting now. It essentially extends the concept of legal identity for all, which is enshrined in the UN Sustainable Development Goal 16.9 into the digital realm. It mandates inclusion, accessibility, and public oversight. It suggests that the ability to establish and use your identity online is becoming as essential in the 21st century as the right to a physical identity on paper was in the 20th. And this framing could profoundly influence how governments decide to fund, design, and govern these critical systems in the future, hopefully ensuring they are built as open, accessible, and citizen-centric public infrastructure, rather than just siloed private marketplaces controlled by a few tech giants. Hashtag outro.
Wow. What a journey we've taken through the research stack today on Tomorrow Unveiled. We started with the incredible acceleration of AI, really noting that critical shift from co-pilot assistant to the autonomous agent and the resulting white-collar structural crisis it's starting to cause. Then we observed how our current policy and reskilling systems are, frankly, failing to adapt anywhere near fast enough, creating that profound data vacuum that required legislative intervention just to even start understanding the scope of the problem. And finally, we explored how digital identity is becoming this critical yet clearly contested foundation for future society, increasingly driven by principles like decentralization, interoperability, and trust, enabled by tech like ZKPs.
Yeah, and the key takeaway for you, the listener, throughout all this, it really seems to be that preparation requires two simultaneous approaches. First, there's the personal level, aggressive upskilling and AI integration. You have to treat the agent not just as a tool, but as an existential challenge to your current skill set. That's essential for your own career survival and adaptation. But second, and just as important, is the societal level. You, we, all of us, need to demand greater governmental transparency like that Clarity Act and demand real socio-technical accountability in the vast digital systems being built around us, especially identity systems. Your active engagement is absolutely essential to ensure these powerful systems ultimately serve the public good, not just corporate profit or state control.
We genuinely love hearing your thoughts on this. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast app, please leave a comment and let us know what you think. How is our society responding to the acceleration of AI? What are your views on the changing nature of digital identity?
And maybe we can leave you with this final provocative thought that kind of ties all these threads together. The shift toward decentralization and identity promises amazing user empowerment and maximal privacy, using brilliant tools like zero-knowledge proofs. That's the dream, right? Yet at the exact same time, the absolute necessity of establishing global standards for interoperability, the framing of identity as a public good requiring oversight, and the imposition of legislative mandates. Well, it implies that the individual's digital autonomy must be constantly and perhaps contentiously negotiated against the state's legitimate need for systemic resilience, security, and control. The future really will likely be defined by how successfully we navigate that fundamental conflict, the tension between maximizing technological utility and protecting fundamental human rights within these powerful new digital systems.
Something to definitely keep thinking about. We'll see you next time on Tomorrow Unveiled.